Every day, approximately 8 million pieces of plastic pollution find their way into our oceans. That's one garbage truck every minute. A lot of this trash ends up on beaches across the world and also deep in the sea, often extremely far from where it originated. We invited Dr. Diva Amon, a deep-sea biologist and founder of Species, and Nathalia Lawen, Peaceboat Ocean and Climate Youth Ambassador, to connect about the effects of plastic on their island nations and how they are advocating to protect the ocean.
So Natalia, what was it like growing up in the Seychelles?
So the Seychelles is a small archipelago in the Indian Ocean. We have 115 islands. And growing up, I guess all the people of Seychelles, we all have a special bond, a special connection with the ocean. Just because we're 99% water and only 1% land, we can call ourselves the Ocean Nation.
And so do you find that because of that prevalence of water where you're from and the fact, do you think that it's actually ingrained in the culture and as a result people respect it more and treat it better?
I think it's actually the contrary. I think we're actually very used to having the ocean there, that we often forget that we're blessed to have to be surrounded by so much water. And I think it's like that in most countries. Like we all depend on fisheries and tourism. People obviously come to Seychelles to see our marine life, our environment. But I guess a lot of Seychelles take what we have for granted just because we're in abundance of a lot of marine life.
That's such an interesting way you put that, because I mean, from Trinidad and Tobago, where I'm from in the Caribbean, we're definitely not as many islands as you. And it's interesting because of course it's, you know, an absolutely beautiful place. Growing up was so wonderful. We were always on the beach, always in the forest. It was just a great way to grow up. And maybe it's because of the reason you said, but maybe it's just we're spoiled by having this around us. But I think you're right. We do take it for granted, and it means we don't treat it as well as we could, unfortunately.
What made you choose a career in deep sea biology?
I mean, I'm not sure what it was like for you. I imagine pretty similar, but growing up on an island, I just fell in love with the ocean and everything that lived in it. I just wanted to know more about it. And it wasn't until I went to university that I took a deep sea biology course. And in that course, in the first lecture, the professor said that less than 1% of the deep ocean has ever been explored. And I mean, it's actually way, way less than 1%. But anyway, that was the moment for me when I was like, hey, who doesn't want to explore in real life? Who doesn't want to see new things in every time they go out on a research expedition? And I think when we're younger, we are, not just when we're younger, but throughout our lives, I hope, most of us are just curious, right? It's just something that keeps us going. That curiosity keeps us asking questions, keeps us learning. And it sort of hit home at that moment that this was a way to remain curious for the rest of my life, because there'll always be questions that need answering. And this is a part of the planet that so few people get to see. And we have so much more to understand. That was it for me, really. And so, I mean, you've done so much work, right? Like work that has been so important in the Seychelles, you know, to do with plastics, to do with climate change. I mean, you tell me about all the amazing things that you've done in the Seychelles.
Well, I can't take all the credit. It was a group of us.
Of course.
So it all started when I was 9 years old. I have a twin sister. So my twin sister took part in the science fair project. And she was doing a science fair project about rainwater harvesting in the Seychelles. And later on, her project was actually adopted by the government. So that's where, yeah.
Oh, wow. Did you say she was 9?
Yes, she was 9. But it was a group of them from, they were led by a group of school teachers. So after that, that's when our passion grew for the environment. Later on in our early teens, we started volunteering for this new NGO, which is a youth-led NGO promoting sustainability in the Seychelles, called SIA Seychelles. So a group of us from SIA Seychelles, we were led by the senior members, and we campaigned for a single-use plastic ban in Seychelles. And this came into place in 2017.
And so you also did like lots of beach cleanups, right?
Yes, that was later on, and we've led many beach cleanups, and we've participated in many beach cleanups, raising awareness about plastic pollution through beach cleanups. Our main participants are usually young kids or the youth, which is good because the kids come to the cleanups and then they learn something interesting, and then they go back to their parents and they tell their parents, look, we shouldn't be using plastic bags because I found this on the beach and it didn't look nice. And I guess the parents feel like, oh, so my kids are telling me something that I don't know, so so I should make a difference. Why am I the adult yet my children is teaching me something?
So I mean, when you do your beach cleanups, are there items that you tend to find are more common than others?
Yeah, we would definitely find more of plastic PET bottles on beaches, and glass alcoholic beverages. We would also find metal bottle tops, straws, cutlery.
It sounds very similar to us. We get, I mean, by far the most common trash on beaches is plastic bottles, for sure. But yeah, other items tend to be like, yeah, household sort of items, like, as you say, wrappers from food, and Q-tips, sometimes the plastic little bits of Q-tips as well. And also we haven't yet, unfortunately, implemented the ban on polystyrene. So it means that we still get lots of little pieces of polystyrene.
Yeah. How does it feel to be the only person doing what you do in your region, and also being a woman? Do you find it hard being a woman in your field, or can you tell me more about that?
So the woman thing is less of an issue in my field because there are lots of other brilliant female deep sea biologists. Those especially working on conservation issues, which is what I work on, tend to be women. And so it's a nice space that's very supportive. But in terms of the region, yes, it's pretty crazy. Like, up until very recently, there were next to no women of color who were deep sea biologists. And in the region, the Caribbean and Trinidad and Tobago, locally, there are no deep sea biologists. And I mean, I love what I do. It's super exciting. We get to see new species, new habitats, new behaviors on like every single time we go exploring. But I mean, it's certainly isolating, right? Because there are people that just don't understand where I've come from, and it's isolating just being different, right? I'm sure that's something you can identify with. Something that I would like to do in my career is bring the deep ocean to many others. Growing up, I never really thought about the deep sea. Of course, we have coral reefs and we have mangroves and we have seagrass and we have all these amazing marine habitats close to shore. But no one really thinks about, out there. And it wasn't until I went to university that I understood that, hey, studying the deep sea is a career option. And, in the last 10 years, I've been fortunate enough to visit the deep sea all over the world. But one of the most special moments for me was getting to do it right at home. In 2014, we had 3 days diving in Trinidad and Tobago's deep sea, and it was one of the most special moments ever. And of course, because deep sea exploration and research is so expensive, you need ships, you need submersibles, you need all these big pieces of tech. It means that most small island developing states, like the Seychelles, for instance, are unable to do it, like Trinidad and Tobago are unable to do it easily without the help of others. So I'm hoping that within our lifetimes, this changes. And I'm hoping that, growing up in this career, I didn't see anybody that looked like me, but I'm hoping that that will change for the youth when they're coming up, especially from where I'm from. So it was because of that, I went away to study, and then I came back to Trinidad and Tobago, and I noticed that there was this kind of like hole where there should have been marine education and advocacy and research, and that just didn't really exist in the way that it should, considering our oceans are such a big part of our area. And so I grouped together with 4 other marine scientists and science communicators, and we formed an NGO of our own called Species. And it, does marine research, education, and advocacy. And it only started like late 2017, so nearly 3 years ago. And it's just getting going, but you know, I think plastics is going to be one of the things that we choose to focus on in the future. Currently, we're doing stuff with coral reefs and turtles because we have massive turtle populations in Trinidad. But there's so much work to be done, and that was why I mean, seeing the lack of knowledge and the lack of awareness and the lack of change, really. You know, you go to the beach and there's trash there, and it just was a throwaway culture, and just no one was treating the environment, or very few people were treating the environment well. In Trinidad, because we don't rely on tourism and we don't really rely on fisheries that much, like where our economy is run on oil and gas.
Oil and gas.
Yeah, we're one of the biggest producers in the region. And not just the region, but also in the world per capita. And I think because of that, it means it's another reason why people just don't really have that need to be aware of the environment and that need to have that care of the environment, because we don't rely on it as much as other places, unfortunately. You know, one of the biggest ways in which we can see the impacts of climate change is that we've had a series of really bad coral bleaching events.
Yeah, I was gonna say in Seychelles as well. We've had hotter water temperatures causing acidification, which has made the corals to lose its colors.
It's very similar. I mean, I started scuba diving when I was 15, and now I'm 32. And in that time, just in my lifetime, I've seen such a huge change in the coral cover around Tobago, for instance. And I mean, I almost don't like going diving now because it's so depressing to see that big change. Of course, I mean, some people go diving, they're like, wow, it looks great. But for the trained eye, it's not, it's quite sad. But I think that's not just because of the rising temperatures, but that's also because of just generally pollution. We have a lot as well, which is a problem, not just trash, but like chemical pollution and runoff and stuff.
So in your time studying the deep sea, what are some of the human impacts you've experienced?
I mean, it's crazy because most people think the deep sea is out there, right? But what we're finding through the work that myself and colleagues have been doing is that it doesn't matter that it's out there. I've dived in nearly all of the oceans, and on every single research expedition that we go on, no matter whether it's the Mariana Trench or off of Antarctica or the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, we always find trash, always. Wow. And I mean, it's the most bizarre things. It's from like plastic bags to tins, like paint tins. I've seen a chair in the deep sea. I've seen books in the deep sea. I mean, it's like household items, right? Items that you and I use every day. On a dive 2 years ago, we found like 30 washing machines and fridges and dryers.
What?
Yes, just all over the deep sea floor. And it's A, bizarre, but B, just really, really sad that our trash gets down there. And what is scary, I think, is that those are the pieces of trash that we can see. But of course, we know that things like plastics break down, right? And they break down into microplastics, and we can't see those easily using the equipment that we have. And we're not sure what the impacts from that are. You know, we think that deep sea corals eat some of these plastics and other animals. What's that doing? And we just have so little understanding of the deep sea generally that we're struggling to understand what the impacts of, for instance, marine trash will be as well. I just published a study that looked at marine trash in the Pacific, actually. But it seems to be really variable. It can come from the rivers and land, or it can come from ships. But what was really heartbreaking was that, you know, it was on nearly every research cruise we've seen trash, and a lot of it was in places that before then no humans had actually ever been or ever seen or ever explored. But yet our trash was there. And I think it's just a reminder that no part of the planet, unfortunately, is out of our reach. What sort of struck home for me was that a lot of these items we see were all household items, you know, items that you and I, well, maybe not anymore, but that the average person uses often. So it kind of hit home that if everyone changed the way they lived, then there'd be less of these items ending up in the deep sea, right?
All we can do is actually minimize the amount of plastics we use, just because plastics have become a very something that's very integrated in our modern lifestyles.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely difficult to make the switch, but yeah, like whenever we go shopping, we don't obviously take any plastic bags. We take our own bags, and there's like loads of really great cosmetics and like soaps and stuff that don't need any plastic containers.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're like naked, which is great. And I haven't actually gotten a bamboo toothbrush yet, but I need to. But what else? I mean, menstrual cups. Hey, they're great. Loads and loads and loads of trash from women going into the environment, specifically. But I think there are lots of little behavioral changes that we can make that definitely lowers how much plastic we consume. Yeah. And of course, it takes time. So, I mean, I know the Seychelles has been like absolutely leading the way in terms of, you know, all things ocean. It's not just the plastic ban, but they've just created one of the largest marine protected areas, haven't they?
Yes, one of the first blue bonds initiatives in the world with, and some of the people that were on this project were very outstanding women, actually, which makes us a very, very proud nation. And their youth.
I mean, I think like the youth, and you're totally right. I was having a conversation about this earlier this week. The youth and the women are like really leading the way in the conservation sphere. And it's a place where they can, I think, really, really shine. You know, as you mentioned, like that's just phenomenal. There are countries with way more resources than the Seychelles that have not protected even 10% of their oceans. It was supposed to be 10% by 2020 and 30% hopefully by 2030. But I mean, most nations are even struggling to do the 10. So the fact that the Seychelles just like roared past and is now, you know, putting everything on the team is just great. Like, it's so frustrating because we're in Trinidad and Tobago, where I'm from, it's like the complete opposite. There's very little awareness, and there's about issues surrounding the ocean and the environment, I think. And because of that, it means there's just not a lot of legislation or will. Unfortunately, we don't have any rules about plastics where I'm from, which is crazy in this day and age. And I mean, in terms of protected areas where I'm from, there is one marine protected area around some coral reefs in Tobago, and it's not well enforced at all. And it is a teeny tiny part of our area. So I know there are plans to get more in line with the 2030 agenda, well, the 2020 and 2030 agendas. But I mean, hopefully that comes on stream soon. But as of yet, it's just, that's not what's happening. And it is really frustrating. I think that just, you know, politicians lack the will, and then people lack the awareness and the will to make those like little changes. But it's about educating people so that they can change their behavior from the bottom up. But I think, of course, that we also need from the top down, right? So there needs to be political will and, you know, change and rules and laws and regulations put in place so that those bigger changes can be made. And I think, you know, they go together. You need that political will, but you need the public pressure to sort of instigate the political will. It was so wonderful chatting today. I'm so glad that we got the opportunity to do this, to hear the similarities, but yet the differences between our two islands, well, not two islands, but our two nations that are so far away in the world, and yet, there are things that bond us, definitely.
This was very enlightening, especially the bits about this deep sea exploration.